Clare Wittman sat frozen in the polished law office, her hands clenched beneath the table as the attorney slid a check across the glossy surface. $10 million made out to her stepsister, Vanessa. Clare's parents exchanged satisfied glances. Her mother turned and said flatly, "Go earn your own, Clare." The words cut like ice, but Clare stayed silent. Her heart raced, felt final, until the firm's senior partner, an older man in a gray suit, stood and cleared his throat. "There's one more document," he said, pulling out a worn envelope. Her grandfather's handwriting stopped everyone cold. Her mother's smile faltered. Vanessa's posture stiffened. No one moved as the lawyer carefully opened it. What followed wasn't just an addendum, it was an eruption. The kind that cracks open long-buried truths. And it would send Clare back to the ranch she once called home. Back to reclaim what was hers. Clare Wittman was never the daughter who stood out at family gatherings. At 31, she was a research scientist specializing in soil regeneration and sustainable agriculture. Her days were filled with data models, greenhouse trials, and academic journals, work that deeply mattered, but never seemed to impress the people who should have cared the most. From the time she was old enough to speak, Clare learned that in her family, intellect came second to charm. And her younger stepsister, Vanessa, had charm in abundance. Vanessa was everything their parents praised: social, stylish, always the center of attention. Clare's mother, Denise, would brush past Clare's science fair medals pinned to the refrigerator and instead gush over Vanessa's cheerleading trophies. Their father, Robert, would forget Clare's birthday but plan elaborate dinners for Vanessa's minor achievements. Even in adulthood, Clare's groundbreaking research into drought-resistant crops received a polite nod, compared to the standing ovation Vanessa got for her marketing awards. "Why can't you be more like Vanessa?" was the family refrain. Polished, loud, easily admired. But Clare didn't need their approval. She had Walter Wittman, her maternal grandfather. A botanist turned rancher, Walter had a mind like hers. He would quiz her on plant genomes, let her mix seed varieties in his barn, and teach her how to test soil acidity by smell alone. Walter made her feel seen. His ranch, tucked at the edge of a sunlit valley, was the only place she felt fully herself. He called her Doc long before she earned her PhD. She called him Walt, and they spent summers under the grape arbor, talking about life cycles, soil, and second chances. When Clare left for graduate school in Oregon, she promised she'd be back. She called often, sent postcards, even wrote letters. Walt wrote back faithfully, but during her final year of postdoc work, the letters stopped. Then came the news: Walt had passed away. She ironed a black dress, prepared a eulogy, and walked into the chapel expecting warmth and grief. It was empty. Not one familiar face. No programs, no photos, just a locked door and silence. When she finally reached her parents, Denise coldly said, "You missed it. We assumed you weren't coming." Clare had arrived 2 days before the service. They had changed the time and location, and told no one. She was in town. They erased her. That realization stayed with her like a bruise that never faded. She returned to Oregon and buried herself in her work, trying to quiet the echo of abandonment. In the years that followed, Clare made peace with the idea that Walt was gone, and her parents had made their choice. She stayed distant. Vanessa rose through the ranks at a lifestyle brand, becoming a social media darling and her mother's pride. Clare focused on publishing research and launching an open-source memory, but no part of her imagined the betrayal was deeper than a missed funeral, until that day in the law office. Until that check. Until the envelope. And until the past came storming back with her grandfather's handwriting on the flap, and a truth that could shake everything they built. Clare stepped out of the car and onto the gravel driveway of the Wittman ranch, the summer wind pressing gently against her face. The house looked the same. White porch, creaking swing, ivy curling over the fence, but something about it felt hollow now. She hadn't been back in years, not since Walter died. Inside, the tension was immediate. Her parents barely looked at her. Vanessa offered a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. Clare held her posture, nodded politely, and took a seat in the family room, where the will reading would begin. What followed unraveled her world. The lawyer read through the standard legal formalities, then announced that the main estate, including the family ranch house, surrounding land and assets totaling just under $10 million, were being transferred to Vanessa, Denise, and Robert. Clare sat perfectly still, not even a mention. She waited for some clause, some addendum. Nothing came, until her grandmother, Eleanor, suddenly interrupted. "This isn't right," Eleanor snapped, eyes locked on Vanessa. A silence settled. Clare turned slowly toward her grandmother, unsure what was coming. Later that afternoon, while sipping tea in Eleanor's kitchen, Clare heard the full story. Her parents had told Eleanor that Clare had cut contact, changed her phone number, and refused to visit. Vanessa had intercepted calls and emails, deleting messages before they reached Walt. She told him Clare had moved on and didn't want reminders of her past. That's why Walt had stopped writing back. That's why Eleanor hadn't heard from her. Clare's hands trembled around the teacup. Eleanor reached across the table, voice thick with guilt. "He died, thinking you left him." The air seemed to leave the room. But it got worse. Clare had never missed the funeral. Her parents had deliberately told her the wrong day. Vanessa went along with it. They didn't want her there. They wanted it all to themselves. Walter's memory, his land, his legacy. They feared what he might have left her. Clare sat motionless as the years of neglect, confusion, and silence suddenly made cruel sense. The countless moments she doubted herself, when letters stopped coming, when phone calls went unanswered. They weren't failures in connection. They were carefully orchestrated betrayals. Eleanor's voice rose. "This isn't how he wanted it. I won't let them rewrite him." The next day, she summoned the entire family again, along with Walter's personal lawyer, an old friend, and the custodian of a second envelope. Clare stood behind Eleanor, calm on the outside, but inside a storm churned. All those years of being the invisible one, of watching Vanessa glow while she shrank into shadows, of being told to stay quiet, stay polite, stay out of the way. Now, finally, someone saw her, someone believed her, and as the family prepared for this second reading, Clare wasn't just waiting for justice, she was preparing to reclaim her voice. The room was painfully still when Clare entered the farmhouse living room. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, illuminating the antique furniture and dust motes dancing in the air. Her parents were already seated, arms crossed, expressions tight. Vanessa sat perched on the edge of the couch, her usual confidence now dulled into uncertainty. When Clare stepped in beside her grandmother, everyone stiffened. Vanessa's face drained of color. Clare said nothing. The lawyer, a soft-spoken man named Everett Dean, cleared his throat and placed a thick manila envelope on the table between them all. He addressed the family calmly. This envelope was held in trust per Walter Wittman's personal instructions. It includes a letter and a supplemental will. Her father scoffed. "This is ridiculous. The estate's already been settled." Everett ignored him. He opened the envelope and unfolded the documents. Walter's alternate will named Clare as co-heir to the estate alongside Vanessa. The shock was immediate. Clare was granted the family's research annex. Vanessa's mouth fell open. No, you said I was getting everything," she snapped at their parents. "You promised?" Clare didn't flinch. Everett continued reading. Walter's personal letter was next. "To my dearest Clare, I knew when you were 7 and explained photosynthesis better than my university students that you were meant for more than this ranch. You have a mind the world needs. I saw your light even when others refused to. I built the annex for your work, and I want it to be yours. The ranch needs your brilliance. The family needs your truth. With love, Grandpa." Clare's throat tightened. She blinked back tears, her expression still steady. The letter wasn't just a testament, it was a vindication. Her parents sat in stunned silence, Denise's jaw clenched, her gaze darting to Eleanor, whose stern expression didn't waver. Robert shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa broke the silence. This isn't fair. She was never here. She left. You said she abandoned him. You told us all lies, Eleanor said sharply. And we believed them. I believed them. But I see now. The weight of decades collapsed in that room, exposed in one reading, one letter, one voice finally heard. Vanessa stood, shaking, her mask crumbling. Her parents were too stunned to comfort her. But Clare didn't move. She didn't need to. Her grandfather had done what no one else ever had. He gave her a place, a legacy, and a voice, and he had done it with the quiet power of truth. Nothing else needed to be said. The lies were unraveling. The reckoning had begun. Vanessa shoved her chair back with a screech and stormed out of the room, slamming the screen door behind her. The sound echoed across the ranch house, like a final crack in the image Clare had grown up believing. Denise cleared her throat, attempting to reassert some control. But Clare was done staying silent. "I want to know," she said, her voice even, "how you justified stealing my place in this family. Telling Grandma I didn't care. Letting Grandpa die thinking I'd abandoned him. Was it that easy?" Her mother rolled her eyes. "Clare, must you always be so dramatic? You left. You made your choices." "I left for grad school. I called. I wrote." Vanessa intercepted my messages. "You lied." Robert finally spoke. "We did what we had to do. Your grandfather was old and confused. You wouldn't have understood how to take care of things here." "You mean I wouldn't have followed your plan?" Clare said. "Because I had my own." Denise leaned forward. "You've always been so ungrateful. Vanessa was here. She helped. You left. Why is that so hard to admit?" Clare took a breath. "I didn't leave him. I left you. And now I understand why I had to." Before either parent could respond, Eleanor stood up slowly, eyes flashing. She said, "You don't get to twist this anymore." Denise turned to her mother in disbelief. "Mom, I believed you when you said Clare didn't Clare. I was ashamed of her for years. For nothing. You poisoned Walter's last days with your lies. You manipulated him. You hurt both my grandchildren. And I'm done letting you get away with it." She pointed to the door. "Leave. Now." "Mother, you can't be serious," Robert said. "I am," Eleanor replied. "Get out of my house." Denise opened her mouth to protest, but stopped when Eleanor didn't flinch. After a long pause, Robert stood up stiffly, followed by Denise. No more words were exchanged. The front door opened, closed. Silence. Clare stood still, feeling an unfamiliar emotion rise. Not sadness, not anger. Relief. That night, the ranch was quiet. Clare walked alone through the fields, the porch light casting long shadows behind her. She wandered past the barn, over the old gravel path lined with the wild flowers she and her grandfather once planted together. She found the greenhouse. It was still standing, faded, dusty, but intact. The inside smelled of old soil and dried herbs, and there on the ceiling, still faintly glowing, were the plastic stars Walter had helped her tape up when she was 9. She smiled for the first time in weeks. The grief was still there, deep and aching, but it no longer anchored her. It moved through her, clearing the path for something stronger. Walter hadn't just left her money or a building. He had left her the truth. A place to build. A legacy rooted in their bond. A home she could finally call hers without apology. He had left her a map, and Clare was ready to follow it. The first time Clare stepped into the annex, she had to pause and catch her breath. From the outside, it still looked like the weathered red barn she remembered. Tall, quiet, unassuming. But inside it was nothing short of a marvel. Climate-treed zones, LED growth systems, touchscreen monitors synced with soil sensors. a hydroponic rig humming softly in the corner, and right in the center of the main workbench was a small, spiral-bound notebook. Her childhood notebook. The one where she sketched out rudimentary crop rotation theories at age 12, taped in pressed flower petals, scribbled ideas about vertical farming and drought-resistant seed varieties. She touched the cover with trembling fingers and felt the weight of the moment. Her knees nearly buckled. Grandfather had kept it, displayed it, built this space for her, quietly, patiently, knowing someday she'd come home. She broke down, not from sadness, but from sheer awe. Over the next few weeks, Claire moved into the annex full-time. She split her time between the lab, the greenhouse, and the guest cottage just behind it. With a small grant she'd applied for years ago and forgotten about, she hired 2 graduate students from the local university, Marisol and Jonah, who were as passionate about sustainable farming as she was. They began testing a new method of regenerative planting tailored to the region's shifting climate. They launched a community garden initiative with local schools, and soon, the ranch was buzzing with young students learning how to compost, plant, and problem solve. Claire, for the first time in her life, felt whole. No one interrupted her. No one dismissed her. No one asked her to explain her worth. Then, one Thursday afternoon, a familiar car pulled into the gravel lot. Vanessa stepped out slowly. She looked different, less styled, less polished, as if she had shed something heavy. Her eyes scanned the annex with hesitation. She held no clipboard, wore no designer sunglasses, just jeans and a windbreaker. Claire walked outside to meet her, not knowing what to expect. "I heard what you've been doing here," Vanessa said, avoiding eye contact. "I was curious." Claire didn't reply. She simply opened the annex door and gestured for her to come inside. They walked through the space in silence. Vanessa touched the edge of the hydroponic bed, trailed her fingers along a wall of seed catalogs, paused in front of the touchscreen that displayed moisture levels in the soil. "It's beautiful," she finally said. "I had no idea this was what Grandpa was building." "I didn't tell anyone," Claire said softly, "but he built it for something real, something lasting." Vanessa nodded slowly. "He saw something in you I didn't." Claire didn't answer. "I didn't come to apologize," Vanessa added quickly. "I know that probably doesn't mean much, but I see it now. What you're doing matters." There was another pause. Then Vanessa looked out toward the garden beds where students were watering seedlings and laughing over earthworms. "Do you need help with the science camp?" she asked. Claire blinked. "You want to help?" "I don't know much about plants," Vanessa admitted. "But I can organize, fundraise. I know people." Claire hesitated. Every instinct screamed to say no, but then she saw it. Not remorse, exactly, but a quiet shift in Vanessa's tone. A humility she'd never seen before. "Okay," Claire said. "Let's see what you've got." Vanessa started coming once a week. She never brought up the will, or their parents, or the past. Instead, she showed up early, stayed late, helped kids label seedlings and manage supplies. She listened when Claire spoke. She deferred when she didn't know something. The pride that had once been Vanessa's armor seemed to melt away, replaced by something quieter. Her presence wasn't fully welcome, not yet. But it wasn't hostile either. Claire didn't forgive everything, but she watched. She noted. She allowed space for change. Not for Vanessa's sake, but for her own. Because maybe this was her final act of power, not revenge, but transformation. And the ranch, once a place of exclusion and silence, was now blooming with new roots. And so was she. Years passed, but Clare Wittman never slowed down. The annex, once a quiet legacy from her grandfather, grew into a recognized research center for climate-resilient agriculture. What started with 2 graduate students expanded into a full team of scientists, engineers, and educators working toward food sustainability. Clare led initiatives that reached beyond her small town. With the help of her collaborators, they launched programs in drought-affected regions of Kenya, developed seed libraries in rural Brazil, and piloted rooftop garden projects in urban communities across the United States. Everywhere her work went, so did her quiet resilience. When she was invited to Washington, D.C. to accept the National Award for Climate Innovation, Clare wore a simple black suit. In her pocket was her grandfather's old watch, its silver worn smooth from years of use. Inside the watch case was a tiny photograph, Clare at age 10, beaming beside her first science fair project, holding a ribbon her grandfather had proudly pinned to her lap. As she stepped onto the stage, the applause thundered. Clare's voice, once hesitant and often overlooked, rang with steady confidence. She spoke about small beginnings, the power of mentorship, and the invisible hands that shape futures. She didn't mention her parents or the betrayal she'd once endured. There was no need. Her presence said everything. Clare no longer lived in the shadow of what had been withheld. Her success didn't rise in spite of her past. It bloomed because she chose to plant differently. She built something that couldn't be taken from her, something real, something enduring. Her parents sent emails occasionally, stiff messages laced with nostalgia and regret, asking for updates or offering half-hearted invitations to holidays. Clare never responded. She didn't engage. That chapter, she knew, was closed. Healing didn't mean reopening old wounds. It meant knowing which doors to leave shut. Vanessa, though, remained present, but differently. Twice a year, she returned to the ranch to volunteer at the youth science camp. She never stayed long. She didn't bring up the past. She arrived quietly, helped where needed, and left where they had gathered fanfare. She'd become surprisingly good at working with the shy kids, the ones who hung back too nervous to speak. Vanessa coaxed them forward with patience that Clare didn't know she had. Maybe she was trying to rewrite her own story, in small pieces. Clare didn't forgive everything, but she found peace in Vanessa's evolution. Growth didn't always come with words. Sometimes it came through service. The ranch had changed too. What was once a symbol of silence and exclusion had become a center of innovation and inclusion. Alumni of the youth science camp went on to become environmental engineers, soil scientists, even teachers. The annex was full of photographs, student projects, and notes of gratitude pinned to the walls. Clare walked those halls daily, remembering her grandfather's laugh, the warm smell of hay and sun tea, and the long summer days they spent talking about the future. She was no longer the quiet daughter in the corner. She was a leader, a visionary, a woman who had reclaimed a legacy not with entitlement, but with truth. In her grandfather's absence, Clare had become exactly what he had always seen in her, not just his granddaughter, but his heir in every way that mattered. Not through money, not through family approval, but through belief, perseverance, and a purpose too strong to silence. She didn't just inherit the land, she inherited the future. Clare lives quietly but meaningfully. Her days are full of small rituals that root her in peace. Each morning begins with the soft clink of 2 coffee cups, and her grandmother's, on the weathered kitchen table in the small apartment attached to Clare's home. They talk about Walter's dentist corpse, his tornade jokes, his stubborn ideas, the way he used to say plants could sense when someone was kind. They speak of him in the present tense sometimes, as if he might walk through the door with soil on his boots and a new seedling in his hands. The rhythm of Clare's life is slow, deliberate. She no longer moves out of urgency, but with purpose. Her work is impactful, her community is strong, and her soul feels settled, not untouched, not whole, but stitched back together with care. On quiet evenings, Clare takes a long walk down to the far edge of the land, where her first greenhouse once stood. That spot, once filled with tiny plants and big dreams, is now a wildflower field. In the center is a bench Walter built decades ago. She sits there and watches the sky darken, one star at a time. For years, she looked to the stars to escape. Now, she looks to remember. There's power in seeing the same constellations she and her grandfather used to trace with their fingers. The pain from the past hasn't disappeared, but it no longer holds her hostage. It's become a scar with meaning, a reminder of the girl she was and the woman she chose to become. Clare no longer checks for emails from her parents. She doesn't wonder what they're doing or whether they've changed. That longing has faded into indifference. She doesn't need their approval. She doesn't need their version of love. What she has now is deeper than anything they ever offered. Connection, legacy, real, enduring love, rooted in action, not performance. The annex hums with life during the day, students learning, crops growing, ideas blooming. But in the quiet moments, Clare listens. She hears Walter's voice in the wind, soft but certain. Write the things they don't understand. One day the world will. She used to think that was just encouragement. Now she knows it was prophecy. Her work has reached people. Her research has shaped conversations. Her name carries meaning, not because she fought to be seen, but because she became impossible to ignore. She returns to the bench and sits until the sky turns completely black and the stars shine without apology. She breathes in the cool air, tastes the earth on the wind, and smiles. The ache is still there, small, quiet, but no longer sharp. No longer a wave and had a courage build, but a life won back from what was handed to her, but from what was almost stolen and courageously taken back. She's no longer waiting to be chosen. She has already chosen herself. And that, finally, is enough. Some betrayals cut deep, not through shouting, but through silence. Clare Wittman didn't face accusations or screaming matches. She faced something colder. Her family didn't fight with her. They erased her. No invitations, no explanations, just absence. They told themselves she didn't matter, didn't care, didn't belong. But what they didn't understand is that quiet doesn't mean powerless. Clare was never loud, but she was never weak. She was watching, learning, growing. And when the moment came, she didn't try to win them back. She rose without them. This wasn't just a story about family or inheritance. This wasn't just about jealousy or favoritism. This was a story about truth, about a woman reclaiming her name, her voice, her place in the world. Clare didn't need to be accepted to succeed. She didn't demand love. She cultivated something stronger. Legacy. Purpose. Dignity. If Clare's journey gave you strength, if it reminded you of your own silence or your own power, we invite you to speak now. Share your story in the comments. Let your voice echo where it was once ignored. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if you believe in the strength of quiet justice. And remember, here at Veiled Fury, we tell the stories that were once whispered until they roared. Stories of women who didn't just survive betrayal, but turned it into their greatest transformation. Subscribe for more. Because one day, the world will understand what silence was really hiding, and it will listen.